You're listening to BusinessFlowShow.com. Let Andrew Roberts and Adam Sowden help you get more flow, freedom, and fulfillment out of your business so you can minimize stress and maximize enjoyment on your business journey.
Welcome to the Business Flow Show. In this episode, we're going to be talking about psychedelics, and more importantly, psychedelics in relationship to business. And the title of today's episode is basically why tripping can be good for the bottom line in your business. Now, let's just start this episode off really quickly by just mentioning the D word. In this episode, we're going to be talking about illicit substances. Now, with the stuff we're talking about today is not recreational drug use. This is not, we're not talking about cocaine. We're not talking about these recreational drugs. What we're talking today about are basically ceremonial drugs or ceremonial psychedelics. And they're substances that you can take that essentially alter the way your brain works for a period of time. And the reason why this is, firstly, Robbo, you and I have kind of grown up slightly differently. Robbo, if you'd love to tell us, if we were talking to you 10 years ago, how you would have reacted if you knew that we were about to start talking about psychedelics. Like, where did you come from? Tell us a bit about your background in relation to this kind of topic.
Oh, I think thanks, mate. And I just love this topic, by the way, how psychedelics can help add to your bottom line. And I grew up in I grew up in a country town in Armidale, New South Wales. I was sent off to a private, boarding school from a young age, a GPS private boarding all boys school. And that was I was an Anglican church. And mate, to be really upfront, because I think we're going to talk about religion a little bit here as well. So I had to go to church twice a week during that school, of which I didn't listen to one sermon. I got so bored with it, I switched off. So I probably became very much like an atheist at school, more from just the boredom of church. And of course, I was brought up to educated and in the belief don't touch drugs. They're bad for you. So 10 years ago, if someone mentioned this psychedelic, number one, I wouldn't have understood what that meant, Adam, and that's true. I wouldn't have even known what the hell psychedelic mean. And definitely number two, I would have thought more like probably 20 years ago. Actually, Adam, 10 years ago might have been okay, but 20 years ago, I would have thought whoever's talking about this is Evel Knievel. Stay away from me. I've experienced a little bit. I think a lot of people have tried marijuana, those types of things. But up to that point, it was like, stay away from me. This is, and purely, mate, because my belief system and how I was brought up was constantly drummed into me how evil these things are.
So look, I'm really glad you said that, because my upbringing was the same. I was brought up in a Lutheran school, and I think next to Anglican, the Lutheran is they're a pretty serious bunch of religious folk there. But my reaction to the whole drug thing was completely different. Like, in my teenage years, I tried bloody everything I could get my hands on, and it wasn't necessarily, like, honestly, when I look back, it was really an instinctive way of trying to get answers. That's why I believe that's what was driving, because I certainly wasn't the kid who was necessarily driven by the need to escape. I was really curious, and that's why I started getting into this kind of thing. But back then, when I was in my teenage years, it was certainly the drugs and drug scene. It wasn't well it certainly wasn't a shamanic ritual. It was a party ritual more than anything. And so, but what we're talking about today is specifically the shamanic side and the psychedelic side of drug use. Because it is drug use that we're going to be talking about. So if it's not for you, and you don't want to, if it's something that you can't listen to, no worries, jump on our next podcast. But if it is for you and you're interested in, because it's actually, to be honest, it's not drugs that we're actually really interested in talking about. What we're interested in talking about is changing the way we think. That's really what this topic is about, and hence the title, which is why tripping can be beneficial to your bottom line in business. So there is actual practical application to this, and we're certainly not condoning anyone. At the end in our notes where we go and tell you what action steps you can take from here. Not one of them is go and take psychedelics. In fact, it's how can you get the same effect without it. So let's just jump straight in and let's just briefly explain the particular type of psychedelic we're talking about. And in this case, it's called ayahuasca. So if you know a bit about ayahuasca, fantastic. If you're new, if you don't really know what ayahuasca is simply a vine that's found in South America. And the vine itself is mixed with a whole bunch of other plant substances into this brew. And the brew you drink in this ceremonial space. And it's a very powerful mind-altering substance. So, and the rituals we're talking about, you would have seen it like every culture in the history, every culture on every continent has had some kind of psychedelic history involved in it. The South American Indians, the Native American Indians, you see them do their peyote rituals. It's ancient Egyptians used to use it. South guys in New Guinea, everywhere, all over the world, even the Australian Aborigines, they were doing rituals like this, and it's where they would get access to their dream time and their and the other worlds, so to speak. So in this episode, we're going to be sharing with you a little bit of our experience with these, and also not just our experience, but what we took from our experience and how we can relate that back into business. Now, for me to kick it off, the reason why I find this is important, and the reason why this is an important topic, it can be summed up by the Einstein quote, which is, you can't solve a problem using the same type of thinking we used when we created them. So the Einstein quote, you've probably heard it before, we can't solve a problem using the same type of thinking we used when we created them. So in other words, we need to think differently in order to solve our problems. Now, personally, sometimes we get fixed in these, like I find this myself, and like we get fixed in a way of seeing the world, and we get fixed into, a story of how things are. And one of the major benefits, I believe, of psychedelics, but more importantly, this kind of ritual, is that it completely changes, like for a set period of time, it completely changes the way your brain works and opens up to a whole bunch of different ways of thinking. So, Robbo, that's kind of, before I go into my story, I'd just love to get your 2 cents on this. I mean, this is something that you and I have discussed, and we were cautious to probably raise this, but we think it's a relevant topic for business owners. I'd love it if you could share, a little bit about your, understanding of and why you started looking into this area for your own development.
Yeah, mate, I'm fascinated, like you, very curious personality. I like to experience, I like to explore, I like to go on adventures, right? I think being an entrepreneur, we're motivated and driven by this type of being. I think a lot of entrepreneurs would be very curious with what we're talking about. And I actually was really open up to this world when Steve Jobs said Apple computers wouldn't have been started if it wasn't for a psychedelic. He had the insight to start Apple computers, and that really opened me up to exploring this whole space, and that led me to ayahuasca, and my experiences with it, and having done it now maybe half a dozen or so times. Adam, I will point out, I don't see it as a drug. It actually stirs me. It stirs me when I hear that it called that. I truly believe it's a medicine. It's totally legal in South America, and there's studies done on it where in the communities that are using it, there's zero crime rate. The intelligence level higher. There's people are aging longer. They're healthier. The benefits that it brings are just enormous, and I actually don't believe it provides me with a different way, a different view of the world. I believe it gives me a rite of passage into a different realm.
Fantastic.
And now, and just to put some context around that, you see, a lot of people, when they hear this term spirituality, they immediately associate spirituality with religion. And, 10, 20 years ago, they put, if I heard the word spirituality, Adam, I would have put my arms up like a cross saying, stay away from me. Don't push your beliefs onto me, right? I'm not religious. I don't want to be tricked into joining a religion. So spirituality has got a whole new meaning for me, particularly after experiencing ayahuasca. Because I believe it's given me a rite of passage into a realm that I'm not consciously aware of in this reality that we're currently in. And I know you know what I mean by that, Adam. Because I believe you access the spiritual realm. And to put that into a different context, ayahuasca is a plant that will provide a direct encounter with a spirit known as Mother Ayahuasca, which is unquestionable a being, an intelligence, something that is just overwhelmingly powerful. And anyone that's experienced ayahuasca will actually put it up there, Adam, with one of the top 3 or 4 experiences of their life. I mean, many will say after a child or after marriage, these things, it's right up there, and it's certainly opened up if you've got a more open-mindedness around spirituality for me.
Fantastic. That's a really good summary, Robbo. I think of ayahuasca and the ritual itself. And it's an interesting thing in South Africa. Nelson Mandela, when he came out of prison and became the president, etc., of South Africa. One of the interesting things is within that culture, within the South African culture, the tribal culture, if Mandela wasn't initiated, it doesn't matter who he is, he's still considered a child. And one of the things that, or if he hasn't got, in other words, by initiation, I mean has been put through a rite of passage, a rite of passage ceremony that transitions him from childhood to adulthood. And so if he hasn't gone through that, he isn't considered an adult. So it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter whether, like in South Africa, it doesn't matter whether you've got a PhD in, the smartest possible thing that you can do. If you haven't had initiation, if you haven't been through the rite of passage, you're considered a child, and you're therefore considered a liability. If you are uninitiated, you are considered a liability. And so in all these cultures that are still using ceremony is considered, it's a rite of passage, just as you were saying. So I'd love to, I'll get into briefly, I'm going to tell you a bit about my experience, and I'd love to hear, some of your stories of ayahuasca or ceremony. And to be honest, just to be really clear, when I first went in and did a ceremony, an ayahuasca ceremony, I know exactly what you're talking about when you're saying it's unequivocally a spirit that you're connected to, because the week leading up to it, I was having dreams about this woman, this kind of tree spirit. I know it sounds a bit out there, but I was dreaming about a tree spirit who was calling me into the forest. She was saying, "Come to the forest." And even my wife, who wasn't with me when I went in this ceremony, my wife was having dreams about this woman as well. And the woman said, "He's going to be okay. You don't need to stress." So prior to the experience, there was something going on in my psyche. There was some kind of, this rite of passage was underway before the medicine was drunk in itself. So when you do the all I can say as well is it's a bit of a as a disclaimer, I don't believe the medicine is for the faint of heart. Like if you want, like if you're not interested in seeing, or if you're not interested in really seeing the truth of a situation, then I probably wouldn't go there, because it wasn't for the faint of heart. And my experience, as you know, Robbo, was very, very challenging. So to kind of fast forward to the moment, we were at this ceremony, and you drink the medicine, and this stuff starts coming on. And to be honest, I just spent a very large, the first half an hour, it seemed, of the night just vomiting, and kind of cleaning out my inside. And then it was a really, honestly, it was a beautiful experience after that, with, lots of psychedelics and, seeing, it was a very visual experience, like, seeing little spirits flying around, and, similar to one of those old, Beatles kaleidoscope, video clips that they used to have. It was an amazing, beautiful experience. But the one thing that was there that was interesting was there was, the whole time throughout the experience, I had this awareness of this spirit, and she was standing with me, next to me, throughout the entire experience, which was actually one of the most comforting things, because when you're very sick, and quite out of it, it was a very sobering thing to know that the whole time there was this mother, La Madre, as she said, standing right next to me. Now, before I went in to do this experience, one of the things, like where my life was heading, was I was involved in a business that it was slowly breaking. It was slowly breaking down, and we've talked about it in other episodes of the Business Flow Show, where business owners, the number one reason why businesses fail is through burnout. And I was in that space of absolute burnout. I was completely burnt out. But the truth was, I had children, and I had, bills to pay. And so that, to me, there was no logical sense in stopping. But in this experience, what like during the ceremony, it was almost like a mirror was held up to my face, and what I saw is that every time I spewed up some idea or kind of false idea came out with it. It was very much a cleansing process of the mind, to the point where, going through this process, I realized, like, when I kind of purged all these ridiculous ideas of what I should or shouldn't be doing, what was left was the raw fact that I just hated my business. Now, I know this sounds really harsh, but what's worse than not finding this out, so what's worse than finding out that my business was depressing me was the thought that I hadn't noticed it before. Like, I was functioning for I don't know how long, depressed about my business and not enjoying it. And so it was an incredibly confronting moment to just sit there and go, actually, everything I'm investing in is wrong, and I need to kill it. I need to kill my business and start again, take some time off and completely refresh the process. And like I said, this is why I say to people, you know, if you don't want the truth, or you're not interested, you know, if you want truth to be a certain way, then don't go and do a ceremony with ayahuasca. It's probably a little bit much. But for me, I wanted the truth because I knew I wasn't happy in the business. And the medicine very clearly showed me that there was the source of my problem was the fact that I was flogging a dead horse, so to speak, within my business, and it needed to die. Now, the ceremony just brought me to that space and said, here is the problem. Here is the problem. And unlike a lot of kind of personal development things, this is why I respect it so much, is that the medicine didn't pretty it up. It just said, here's your problem, right there. This is the source of the problem. And it also said, and by the way, you're a grown-up, so you need to go and figure out how to deal with this. It didn't give me a solution. It just brought me straight to the source of what was kind of eating me up on the inside. And, one thing led to another. After that, there was a whole process of winding up a business, taking some time off and starting again refreshed. And it was an absolute turning point, because I don't know where I would be, or where my relationship would be, or even where my business would be if I didn't come to that realization during the ceremony. So it was a very powerful, it was a very powerful experience for me, and it caused a significant life change. But it just brought me, it just cleaned out, like it was like one of those, when you on your car, you've got the water that sprays up and cleans the windscreen. It just completely cleaned my windscreen and said, Adam, there's your problem. We've been looking at this through a foggy filter. Here's the real issue. Now you need to figure out what to do with it. Rob, I'll wind it up there, but what was your experience with
and just to take it back a step, just to give it a bit more context around what it actually is, I think, Adam, and I watched The Matrix recently, and I swear the people that created The Matrix must have just done it after an ayahuasca experience, because I think The Matrix summarizes the vortex that you access, and for me, just in agreement with you, Adam, I think you need to be called to it. I think it calls you. And for those that are hearing this thinking, I want to get out there, do your research. There's a whole lot of documentaries. Google it and really read about it. Really, really research it before doing anything about it. So just to take a step back as well, and Brian Tracy many, many years ago, Adam, I was listening to this CD called The Psychology of Achievement, some of my favourite CDs. And he talked about this concept known as the superconscious. So you've got the subconscious, and then you've got the superconscious. And he talked about the superconscious is access to this place called the unified field. And the unified field is where everything is stored. So it's where any thought that's ever occurred is stored there. You've got, there's a book that I'm sure most people have heard about, which is Think and Grow Rich. And they talk, and the author talks, Napoleon Hill talks about you can access the greats in this universal field, this super conscious. You can actually tap in and ask them a question and receive an answer, right? And I remember that all the way back then, I became fascinated in this super conscious, in this unified field. And ayahuasca is the right. It's like it's like this line of communication that puts you straight into that unified field. So when I first had it, similar to you, it's a very ritual. I drank it, and I actually had a cup, and not a lot happened. And it was only on the second cup when it just, for me, Adam, it felt like a snake went over me and swallowed me. Like I just was like, whoop, into this vortex, like the Matrix. And I remember just questioning, what am I, right? I was really, what actually am I? And it was the first time I got real proof of I'm not my body. And I've heard that before. And it dissolved my entire body away. So it brought me down to this pure, if you can appreciate, soul. I actually saw myself for what I was, and I wasn't this body. I was this source of energy, this spirit. It's very hard to describe it. It was, if you could appreciate a ball of energy, I was this spiritual being living this human experience. And I'd read that before, but ayahuasca helped me get that. I got it, and I went, oh my God, I'm not. You
experienced it.
I experienced it. I actually had and I got it. And then I had this incredible meeting with this extraordinary power, this intelligence that could answer any question I asked it. And Adam, they always say, create an intention and ask questions. And I had like 20. What's my purpose to my life? What should I do here? What's going to happen here? I just had all these questions because I'm, naturally a very curious. So I wanted to find stuff out. And there's two. I'm going to just share two stories. But the first question that I asked Mother Ayahuasca, and bearing in mind, every single person has a different experience. And I asked this intelligence, what's my purpose? And it just started tickling me. It was like, and I remember just closing my eyes, and I just started laughing, and I was actually consciously laughing, even though I'm in this crazy world, and I'm just uncontrollable laughter. And it just stopped, and it said, Andrew, that's your purpose. And I went, what? Just have fun. You put on this planet just to have fun. Have fun. It's like, cool. And it was I was asking questions, and it was really quite abrupt. Like I'd say, at this time, trying to work out where I was going to live, Andrew, where I was going to live, Adam, and I'm like, where should I live? And it's just like, wherever you friggin' want. And it was just so direct, and so I just felt, holy moly, I've got access to this intelligence and the answers were so strong that I didn't question. It was like I talk about 30 years worth of counselling in one night. And that was my first experience, and I actually went back at him, and I wanted to share this one because I went back on my second experience with a very clear intention, and I have, throughout my life, had a really big fear of commitment, and particularly commitment in relationships. And I don't know where it stemmed from or where it's come from, and it was just a pattern that I've been running over and over again. And I've been through quite a few relationships that hadn't worked out. And I remember, and I want to talk about it, and I'm going to link this back shortly with how to help it add money to your bottom line. Because this was a huge learning for me about commitment. And so I rock up, and I'm sitting there, and I said, after the intention, I said, I want to understand why I've got this fear of commitment, and I want to understand how I can remove it. And this big overpowering forth came through me, and it said, so Andrew, you think you've got a fear of commitment? And I'm like, yes, I'm having this conversation, Adam, with this intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And it said, and by the way, I was in a relationship at this particular time, and I was still going through the motions of, do I want to commit to this, or, you know, and I was still experiencing fear, and I wanted to resolve it. And I'm having this conversation, and it says, so you think you've got a fear of commitment? And I'm like, yeah. And it said, what if you didn't think you had a fear? And I said, what do you mean? And it said, what if we just rub that off your brain? And I said, what do you mean? And it said, well watch this. And an eraser went whoop, straight into my head and started rubbing off this thought that I had a fear of commitment. And I'm sitting there going, oh my God. So if I just drop the thought that I think I have a fear of commitment, it's gone. And in that one moment, she erased it. Like, it was gone. And I sat there and I went, it was just like this immediate, like, bloop. I then committed to Sunny, who I'm now getting married to, because it was just, I couldn't believe it. And then I started looking at business, and I started realizing, you know, how many people don't truly commit to their businesses, or they're holding back, or they're waiting for something better, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I just sort of, I got fear and how quickly it can be removed. And it's really hard to describe this, but it was so strong. This experience was so intense for me, and I remember seeing Sunny the next day, and just, mate, it was just one of the most emotional days, because all this rubbish and all these years and all these stories that I've carried around with me for decades upon decades were gone in one night. And I've never, since that day, I've never, ever, ever questioned the relationship again. Fascinating experience for me. So, you know, that's one example of how psychedelics can help you on your bottom line, because I then rubbed that back through, because I started asking, wow, I've also got a fear of commitment to business. So, mate, how else can you see it helping on the bottom line?
Well, again, we've got to come back to the thing that you said. Every single person has their own unique experience. So it's very, you can't, like, all I can do is share what I got out of it. And the main thing that the big thing that I got was the value of an honest conversation. Now, with my, I suppose the main thing I got in the, like, you know, I've given a very abridged version of my experience here, but although it was painful, and I saw the depression and, you know, fatigue, I suppose, that I had, like, it was even in my cells at the time. And similar to you, I also had like a snake, like I felt like I'd been wrapped up in a snake, like a big boa constrictor, actually. And the thing squeezed the living crap out of me for half of the night. And like, I had stuff coming out of my ears and my eyes and my nose. It was like the biggest cleansing. But I suppose where this, there's a saying, it's time for, like in business, every now and then you need to have a come to Jesus conversation. Now, a come to Jesus conversation translates to, I need to sit down with this person and have an honest conversation. Now, what I've noticed and how that whole experience has changed me, I've always been able to have the honest conversation. Like, it's something that I have appreciated. However, now I see that is so, so crucial to be able to sit down and really get to the truth of the situation. Now, whether it's with my clients, or whether it's with my business partners, or whether it's with my children or with my wife, there is the ability to have an honest conversation and say, look, this is really what's going on here. is, like, to me, the most valuable thing you can do. If you can do that with a client, and the client is willing to, or a business partner, and they're willing to be honest with you, you have a relationship for life. And I think in business, most, you know, what's important, or one thing that's really important in business is having that core team of people around you who've really got your back, who you've got their back, and it's a real team environment. And that's literally what I got out of it, is to be able to say, this isn't working, and it needs to die. That part of our business needs to stop or change, or we need to address it. And that one, like I said, that one thing, the honest conversation, it's how it's infiltrated my sales process. So if I'm doing sales, like, we've completely taken, you know, the need to sell or get a result out of our sales process. So our sales process is really a conversation simply to find out whether our clients really need us or not, and whether we're the right ones for them. Because if you can do that in your sales conversation, there is no, you know, sales technique that you need. Yeah. You're just really trying to understand where they're coming from. And, you know, you've got to be careful with the honest conversation. You can't just, you know, blurt out you know, sometimes people don't like having the elephant in the room named, but, you know, if you're compassionate with it, you can be honest with a prospect or a client or a business partner, and they will thank you for it, even if it's uncomfortable. And when you've got that, you've got clients for life, you've got business partners for life. So that's what I got out of it. It's the ceremony for me was a mirror, and it just reflected back to me what was really going on. And if I can bring that level of awareness to my own business, or to my, you know, to my colleagues and friends, I mean, it's a very, very valuable resource to bring.
Mate, I will add to that, and again, it's a Buckminster Fuller quote when he was. We speak a lot about Buckminster Fuller and Marshall Thurber and teaching Buckminster Fuller's teachings, and Buckminster Fuller was very unhappy with his life. I won't go into the whole story, Adam, but he lost his daughter and he was committing suicide. And his plan to kill himself was to swim out in the middle of the night into a lake and drown. Uh-huh. And he swam out one night, full moon, and he started dropping down underneath the water with a view to never come back up. And he had this huge bolt of lightning, like a very, very strong voice that said, "You don't own you, the universe does." And it was so strong for him that he didn't kill himself, and he dedicated the rest of his life understanding that voice. What is that voice? Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that? Mm-hmm. And what ayahuasca confronts you with is the truth. Mm-hmm. And the truth can be really, really hard to take because your ego doesn't sometimes like hearing it. Mm-hmm. And you've hit the nail on the head. It's having an honest realization or conversation, and sometimes hearing what you don't want to hear. But if you keep avoiding the truth, you suffer. When you're true to the truth, when you're paying attention to the truth, you're happy, you're in flow. And a perfect example of this, Adam, there was an entrepreneur that I experienced it with, whom had this goal to be an author. And all he ever wanted to do was to be this international, world-class, well-known author, and had written multiple books. And the following morning, we're sharing the experience, and he was just an emotional mess. Couldn't stop, very emotional. And, when it was his turn to explain what happened, he said, "Wow, I was educated last night by this intelligence that I'm not supposed to be an author." and it's my it's my ego, and so my life's work, what I thought I'm supposed to be, is not it. And so he was devastated on one hand, but liberated on the other. And I think I think ayahuasca will give you such a, this is your truth. This is what I want for you. This is my plan for you. This is where you're not being true to that. And a lot of the vomiting and a lot of the they call it purging is all the energy and effort that you put into avoiding your truth, your flow, where your sweet spot. And it's confronting because let's take an entrepreneur that has a vision to have a multi-million-dollar company, and you've got that vision because your friends have a multi-million-dollar company, or your family were like this, or all these other people want you to be this, and so you're pushing really hard to have this. If the universe doesn't have that in store for you, if that's not what it's planned for you, you can create an enormous amount of challenge in your life. And I think these rituals are a rite of passage to the truth. And sometimes it's just so liberating. I mean, I for one, Adam, have let go of the need or the desire to have a multi-million-dollar huge big corporation like I used to. And I've now realized that it's not who I am. I'm a coach. I'm born to do this, and where it takes me is another story. But it's being okay, letting go. That's the key word, by the way. It's in the letting go and handing the keys over to someone else to guide.
Yeah. Well, it's a major premise of in Taoism, of like in the I Ching, it says true power is not something we graduate to. True power is the realization of our dependence on the higher for our success. So it's true power is not something we graduate to. In other words, you don't earn power. It's a realization that you're dependent on the higher. And I think, the cycle comes back to that Buckminster Fuller quote, you don't own you, the universe owns you. The only time I've really been stressed and upset in my life is when I've assumed I know what's best for me, instead of, letting life tell me what's best for me. I've had relationships that I wanted to be in that the universe said, it's not yours. And to be honest, it just pissed me off. I've been in businesses that I wasn't meant to be in. I've had lived in places I wasn't meant to live in. And whenever, coming back to the whole premise of this show is about finding flow. It's the key, the one, if I can give up all of my, I suppose, tricks to get in flow, the single one that I think is most important is about alignment and even subjugation to, that's probably not the best word for it, but handing, control of my life to a higher power. That's the thing that has put me into flow most often. In fact, I do it I do it with when I'm playing sport. Or if I've got to do a presentation, I'll do all the work, and then before I go on to do a presentation, I'll hand it over. I'll say, if you want me to do this, you better help me. So I'm handing control over to you, and just give control over to something higher. And every time I do that, there is a far more successful outcome.
Yeah, and Matt, I write in my book, What Are You Chasing? What the hell are you chasing? When you let go of how you think it should be, and you embrace how it is, your life magically becomes the one you're striving so hard for. And for me, that's what the ayahuasca gives me gratitude. and opens me up to just let go of all that rubbish, Andrew. This is what's real for you. This is who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Do this. And
Yep.
when I leave a ceremony like this, I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm living in my heart. It moves me from head to heart, and I become more real. I become Andrew. I become centered.
Yeah.
I'm out of my ego, and I become a better person, mate. My relationship improves with my partner, with my friends. My clients benefit because I'm not trying to be something that I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, how can you find negatives on something that gives you that? I've got just so much gratitude for the ability to have that experience, and I believe you can come to that place, Adam, and I'm sure you do, without having an ayahuasca experience. Like there's other means to come to that acceptance place.
Mm-hmm.
And my life's actually great as it is. But it's such an eye-opener. And I think, Adam, prior to launching this show, mate, you'd agree with me that this was such one of our main reasons for doing this, was helping
Absolutely.
give people permission to be real, right? To be who they are, and not trying to be something you're not.
Yeah, well, look, it's a goal for me in business whenever I'm presenting. My presenting goal, if I've got to do a talk or something like that, is my goal is to, and in this podcast, is to have very little, if any, stage persona. So it's the goal is, you know, who I am
Be
here
real.
is the same person, you know, when I'm with my children, when I'm with my wife, you know, just to have that sense of congruency. And I think that's the one, you know, that's one of the most powerful things that I got out of the medicine ceremony, is how fickle the ego is when it comes up against a medicine such as that. It literally does dissolve.
It does.
You know, depending on how much you're invested in that fickle false self, determines, I suppose, how confronting the experience can be. But having said, you know, you alluded to something before, Robbo, and like I know with the only other time I've experienced an energy like this has been when my wife was in labour. When she was going through, when she was in labour, especially with my third child, because the first two, my head was spinning the whole time. But with my third child, I had exactly a very similar experience. Wow. Where, you know, it's when a woman's in labour, it's like there's a portal between worlds that gets opened up, and you know, she had her own rite of passage there. Like women, you know, it's one of the big things that you see when people have children. And also the other thing, I suppose, is you know, initiation. If you've got children, they seriously don't give a hoot about, you know, your precious, you know, my precious egoic identity. The children see straight through it. So, you know, I do look for people. You know, I ask people, do you have kids? If I'm going to do business with them, and it just gives me an idea, you know, of the degree to which their ego has copped a battering through life. And I think it's probably a healthy thing for business owners to knock it around a little bit.
It is.
To be real. So let's give some tips. Like, how can folks, I mean, aside from condoning a trip to South America, you said one of the things you said is do your research. I think, you know, we've mentioned before, there's other ways you can, you know, get a similar experience, you know, Vision Quest, etc. I suppose one of the things that my tip, I suppose, for people is get into the habit of having a real honest conversation with yourself. But when you're having that honest conversation, just understand that most of what you'll be telling yourself is usually bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
When you're having an honest conversation, it's not about what gets said necessarily, you know, what's going on in your mind, because you know, as you saw, you can just get a giant spiritual rubber eraser and rub it out. I mean, it's just, the honest conversation is less about what's being said, and I think more about you observing, you know, the stuff that goes on in your mind, because you can change that. So that's my 2 cents. Have an honest conversation with yourself. Have honest and compassionate conversations with your friends and colleagues. What about you, Robert? What tips would you have?
Oh, mate, I've got one, and it's meditation. And meditation is no doubt a gentle access into the unified field. And just, we'll have a proper session on meditation, so we won't go into it too much now. But for me, in a snapshot, it gives you access to your intuition. That's always there, mind you, but it stops the crazy monkey brain and shuts it down for long enough for you to tune in to your higher self, to what we call your big brain. Your little brain's the crazy stuff going off in your head, and then you've got this big brain, which is this intelligence, which is guiding you at all times, guiding all of us. And it's so real, and meditation enhances that relationship with it dramatically. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right, mate. Well, we'll finish it up there. So, folks, if you have listened, and please, we'd love it if you could share it and like it. If you are interested in more, we're going to be doing more podcasts on this topic and similar types of topics. So please subscribe as well. But let your friends know about us, and we'll see you on the next podcast. So take care, and we'll see you then.
See you later, everyone.
Bye-bye.